that essentially led to me doing a Winston Churchill Fellowship that looked at, is this a challenge for people elsewhere? Because I didn't know what to do about it. You know, we were doing what we could ad hoc to support the well-being of our people, but I didn't feel like we were even touching the surface. So, and how do we support others? If we're really going to support communities, then we needed to make sure we were doing something to support supporters, because, you know, I talk about eggs and pavlova. So who here has tried to make a pavlova? So if you get your recipe out of the cupboard, which has undoubtedly been handed down to you from your New Zealand relative, because that's where it came from, and if you get your recipe out, what's the first thing it tells you to get out of the fridge, or where they keep them? So I want you to think about how you'd go and make. So how would you make a pavlova without eggs?
I've tried it with no eggs. I have an anaphylactic egg child. Don't do it. It could be a new environmental building product, but I'm sure you will.
So I'm just going to roll you out. So what I say is essentially recovery without the supporters, without the people, is like trying to make pavlova without eggs. It does not work. No. There you go, you're proof.
I am proof.
So you do end up doing...
You do end up with something that's not useful like anything.
Good on you, Tracy, you had it going.
I had it going. It looked good, but it was rubbish.
Okay, so I'm just going to take photos of.
Yeah.
So I visited Kinglake. That's one of my first stop, and then I visited Kobe, an earthquake in the 1980s, the Shino marking where they had the tsunami, and I visited US where they had 9/11 occur, and Hurricane Sandy. So quite purposefully, very different types of disasters, very different timescales, but all quite purposefully looking at places that were sort of middle tier socioeconomic, who probably have similar secondary stresses, you know, similar type environments in terms of insurance and the things that people are dealing with. Quite purposefully interviewed a very broad range of people, from World Bank through to you know, local volunteers who are fixing people's buildings, people's houses. So quite purposefully, and asking them, is this a challenge that you see elsewhere as well? And if so, what's helpful? What do you wish had happened? So if you're interested in the results of that, maybe we could have an email. Yeah. So, but supporting the supporters.org. It's got the full report, and it's heavy in there of anecdotes from people around the world who are saying what they experience. Yeah. So it's different to the Companion Through the Chaos book. Yes, it's supporting the supporters.org. And on there you'll find the report, and it has some of the strategies that we should be employing to support people working in recovery. None of them are rocket science, but they are so much broader than promoting self-care, which is so important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle, and promoting EAP, or Employee Assistance Program. Again, really important, but it's one piece of the puzzle. And it comes down to essentially leadership. And some of the things that came out of that, again, not rocket science, but people saying, actually what has been most helpful has been being connected with others who are facing similar challenges, or people who have been there before and have a bit of perspective, you know, from somewhere else, and can see a bit of perspective. And from my own experience, the difference between me maybe being a quivering ball in the corner and coming out the other end thinking it's been one of the most challenging things I've ever done, but it's also the most meaningful, has been colleagues from Australian Red Cross. You know, because we hadn't really done this before in New Zealand. In terms of recovery, I think our last big event was World War II-ish with Napier earthquake. So we were learning to build the plane as we were flying it, and it was terrifying, right? Most people working in disaster recovery haven't done it before, they're local. It's pretty scary. I'm seeing some nodding, yeah.
I think we're all virgins.
Yeah. So to have someone that I could pick up the phone to and say, I could be really human with, and say, you know, what do I do? Can I do this? What do I do next? Was super helpful for me. And we had a psychosocial subcommittee meeting where we had fairly decent aftershock, and it was on the 4th floor of a building that fairly went to town. And at the time I was the recovery manager in Christchurch. So I did my thing, you know, went out and texted, make sure the kids were okay, and then went through and texted all my volunteers, checked on all my staff, checked everyone was fine. I sat there and thought, you know, our head office is elsewhere. They're also an organisation that's incredibly, they're under a lot of strain because there's a lot going on. My family's in the North Island, probably wouldn't know about it. My husband works south where he doesn't feel them. And I thought, you know, like we're not very good at thinking about who takes care of the carers. And then I got a text from Kate Brady from Australian Red Cross that said, hey chick, just heard you had an earthquake, are you okay? And that meant so much to me. It was probably something she just flicked off, you know, she's very good at that sort of stuff, right? But it meant a huge amount to me, and I think it really did make a difference, those sorts of things, having someone in your corner with a bit of perspective, with a bit of space, whose head was out of the minutiae, you know, that could really look out for you. And there was a lady that I visited in a little city outside of Ashina, who, like most people, hadn't worked in recovery before, was supporting people in temporary accommodation. And when I asked her through the interpreter, this is what we're facing in Christchurch, this is a real challenge for us in terms of the tiredness of people working in this space. Is this something that you experience too? And if so, what's helpful? And she started jigging around the room, chanting something. I said, what is she saying? And she said to me, she's saying, I am human. She's saying, you know, the first year I had all this energy, I had all this enthusiasm, I had all this passion, and I just went for it. She said, you know, in the second year I wanted to, but I was finding that my energy was flagging. By the third year I thought there's something really wrong with me. She said, I found it really hard to admit to others. They have what they call samurai silence. You know, you just don't cry, you don't, you know. We have the number 8 wire mentality, which is self-sufficiency. I mean, in the States they talked about the John Wayne syndrome, you know, where you're expected to just man up and carry the world, you know, like Atlas, I guess, on your shoulders. So we all, for different cultural reasons, have this high expectation of ourselves and of each other. And so she said she didn't feel like she had really been able to admit that to anyone, and she felt very alone, and she thought she was weak and there was something wrong with her. So to hear that someone else, somewhere else, was experiencing something, and that was quite normal, was very freeing for her. And a few days later, she invited me to dinner and said to her colleagues, said to me, tell them what you told me. You know, and I just think that's, you know, New Zealand Red Cross, we were very fortunate to be part of a global organisation where we had access to that type of support, but not everyone does. And so that was one of the things that came through very strongly. Find informal ways for people to connect. Make sure that you do keep connecting with others that are facing similar challenges and other organisations. And link people, if you can, or even, I know Australian Red Cross is probably quite helpful with this, link people who've experienced something similar somewhere else. So if you're a community house leader, then find, you know, a community house leader in Kinglake or in Christchurch. You know, that sort of thing. If you're working for council, same sort of deal. To try and link up and have that person who has got a bit of perspective and a bit of distance that can help support you. And this is part of me being here now, is because I feel we've had so much love and support come from this side of the Tasman. It's really nice to finally feel I have something, hopefully, to contribute back the other way. So that came through very strongly in terms of how we support people. Another one was from Anne Leadbeater. So she's from Kinglake. And she talked about, you know, we've all heard that analogy of the marathon. Yeah? And she said, but it's a marathon where you don't know where the end is. You don't know what the end looks like. You don't know when to stop and have a drinks break, because you don't quite know when you're due for one, so you just keep running. You don't even know when to pat yourself on the back because you're at the halfway point. So people just keep running until they fall over, and that's certainly been our experience. We've had massive turnover in our organisation over time. And she said that's really challenging, and so we need to be much better at building it in, because we will always focus on what still hasn't been done. We will always still focus on the unmet need, on the things that are still out there that need to be addressed and what hasn't gone well. And so we need to be much better and more intentional about ensuring that we put aside time to stop, to reflect, to take a break away, you know, and to celebrate what we do, because we're always focused on what's not yet been done. So whether that's weekly meetings, whether that's for yourself personally, whether that's, you know, every 3 months, taking a day away, whatever it is, to find ways to build that in. So that came through quite strongly, and there were a few various other principles as well.